Good morning, everyone. This is meeting number 12 of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts, Tuesday, May 10th, 2016. And I'll just remind our committee members and those in the audience today that we are being televised, and so if you could please mute your telephone, your phones or other communication devices, that would be appreciated. Also to the committee, at the close of this meeting, we will take some time to go in camera for committee business. So just bear that in mind. There may be a couple rounds of questioning that would be cut short, but there should be ample time for us to question our Auditor General again today. Today we are considering the main estimates 2016-2017, Vote 1 under the Office of the Auditor General, and Report on Plans and Priorities 2016-17 of the Office of the Auditor General of Canada. As our witnesses today to help us with this study, we have from the Office of the Auditor General, our Auditor General, Michael Ferguson, Mr. Sylvain Ricard, Assistant Auditor General, Ronald Bergen, Principal, and Susan Seeley, Principal. So I would invite Mr. Ferguson, the Auditor General of Canada, to begin, please.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, we're pleased to have this opportunity to discuss our 2014-15 Performance Report and our 2016-17 Report on Plans and Priorities. With me today is Sylvain Ricard, Assistant Auditor General of Corporate Services and Chief Financial Officer, Susan Seeley, Principal of Human Resources, and Ron Bergen, Principal of Strategic Planning. As the Legislative Auditor of the Federal Government and the 3 Northern Territories, we support Parliament and territorial legislatures by providing independent and objective assurance, advice, and information about government financial statements and the management of government programs. The Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development carries out our mandate related to the environment and sustainable development. Tous nos audits sont menés.
We conduct all our audits in accordance with Canadian auditing standards. We subject our audits and our system of quality control to internal practice reviews and to periodic external reviews to provide assurance that you can rely on the quality of our work. In addition to carrying out our audit work, we are engaged in the advancement of legislative audit methodology, accounting and auditing standards, and best practices. We also work internationally, supporting projects funded by Global Affairs Canada, sharing knowledge, building professional capacities, and promoting better managed and accountable international institutions.
Our financial statements, our net cost of operations was $92.4 million in the 2014-15 fiscal year, of which $77.7 million was provided through the main estimates. We had a budget of 565 full-time equivalent employees and employed the equivalent of 547 full-time employees. With these resources, we delivered 87 financial audits, 3 special examinations, 27 performance audits, and 2 case reports under the Public Servants Disclosure Protection Act. This represents all planned audit work except for 1 performance audit on sustainable development of commercial fisheries, which was cancelled. Our 2014-15 performance report identifies several indicators of the impact of our work, along with measures of our operational performance, which are attached to this statement as Appendix A. In monitoring the impact of our work, specifically the extent to which federal government organizations addressed the issues and concerns raised in our audits, our targets were met for special examinations and performance audits. Our target was not met for financial audits, though the affected audits represent less than 4% of our total work. Dans le rapport sur le rendement,
In our 2014-2015 performance report, we note that parliamentary committees reviewed 32% of our performance audits. This finding represents an increase from 24% in the 2013-2014 fiscal year, although it is below our target of 65%. In total, we participated in 21 parliamentary committee hearings and briefings on our audit work.
Organizations subject to performance audits, 59% either agreed or strongly agreed that our audit reports were understandable and fair and added value. This result was below our target of 80% and below recent results, which ranged from 74 to 79%. Our analysis shows that most of the remaining respondents were neutral, neither agreeing nor disagreeing that our reports added value, and they identified no particular opportunities for improvement.
Our measures of organizational performance remain generally positive. In particular, our practice reviews, which serve as a key quality control in our audit methodology, found that our audit reports were appropriate and supported by proper evidence. Turning now to our report on plans and priorities for 2016-2017. Our strategic plan identifies a number of client, operational, and people management objectives that we use to manage the office and direct our continuous improvement efforts. In the 2016-2017 fiscal year, we will focus most of our improvement efforts on the following three priorities. First of all, we will improve the governance and management of the office through the implementation of new senior management roles and responsibilities and improvements to our risk management procedures. These actions should lead to more streamlined decision-making at the most appropriate level in the organization. Second, to develop and maintain a skilled and bilingual workforce, we will monitor employee participation in our required professional development program, develop and deliver empowerment workshops, and implement second language learning plans. We are committed to providing our staff with the training and development opportunities they need and to supporting them in meeting the language requirements of their positions.
Objective of ensuring that we continue to select audits that are likely to have significant impact and value, we will review our audit mandates and the allocation of our audit resources to focus on audits of greatest importance. We are also reviewing the performance indicators that we use to manage the office and to report to you on our performance. We expect to complete this work in the coming months. Tables containing our current performance measures are attached to this statement as Appendix B. For the 2016-2017 fiscal year, we are requesting parliamentary appropriations of $78.5 million in our main estimates. Our planned number of full-time equivalent employees is 570. With these resources, we expect to complete more than 85 financial audits, 24 performance audits, and 6 special examinations.
In conclusion, Mr. Chair, my staff and I look forward to continuing to provide you with products of the highest quality and value in the coming year. We thank you for your ongoing support of our work. We would be pleased to answer your questions. Thank you very much.
Your testimony, and we'll move into the first round of questions. For 7 minutes, Mr. Lefebvre.
Bon matin à tous. Merci
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for being here. In your report, Mr. Auditor General. You said that 32% of the reports have been subjected to a parliamentary study, and that your role is 65%. That's an important gap. Could you explain to us what the difference is? Because you're talking about the 32% and whether it can be achieved, and why is there such a gap? The only thing that I can say is that they are the numbers, and this is something that we're trying to identify as to the numbers of hearings where we had to discuss our reports with parliamentary committees. But of course, it's up to the parliamentary committees to hold hearings relative to certain audits that we have tabled. Consequently, for us, we hope to have opportunities to discuss about our reports and our consultations, but of course it's up to each committee to decide whether the subjects are of interest for those committees. Question: how many other committees study your reports that you table, and which ones are they? Once again, it depends on each situation. In the past, we had different hearings. First of all, I can say that we have the mandate from the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development, and these reports are tabled at the Environment Committee, and of course this is when we appear before the Environment Committee, and sometimes there are hearings with other committees, perhaps the Defense Committee or Aboriginal Affairs Committee or Indigenous Affairs Committee, and sometimes with certain Senate committees as well. Question: are you able to measure to what extent your audit products lead to tangible results within government? After you table your audit report, can you assess what changes have been made thereafter? Answer: this is a regular challenge for us to find the best way to identify the results of each of our audits. But of course, on occasion, we carry out follow-up audits dealing with the same subject matter where we've carried out an audit in the past. So it's one way of proceeding. But it's not necessarily a good way of finding out whether the results have been changed, because it takes a lot of time to carry out a new audit relating to the same subject matter. But now this is the only way that we have to try and assess whether our audits have a specific impact or not. And of course, with all our recommendations, well, all the departments are in agreement with our recommendations as stipulated in our audits, and they prepare action plans in order to deal with the issues that we've identified. But the only way in which to ensure that the recommendations are and improvements are put into place is really to carry out a follow-up audit. Thank you very much. I'll leave the floor to my colleague. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here this morning. I have a question in relation to the targets that you said you haven't reached in the financial reports that you said that you didn't obtain the performance audits or the financial statement audits that you wish to. Is there a reason why you weren't able to attain those targets? Is it because the departments that had difficulties in providing the information because of time frames, or were there other reasons? Answer: there are two audits in particular, the financial audits relating to pension plans, the reserve force pension plan Canadian Forces Pension Plan, and the information was not prepared in the appropriate time frame for us to carry out our audit according to the calendar we had set out. So that often happens. Furthermore, on occasion, we have the same type of issue with other types of audits relating to Crown corporations in the three Northern Territories, because we are also the Auditor General for those three territories. And so sometimes it's difficult to obtain the necessary information in the appropriate time frame. Do I have a little bit of time? Yes, all right. I would like to know whether it's possible for you to provide us with a list of all the departments that didn't provide answers, that remain neutral, that didn't say yes or no to your recommendations. Is it possible to have such a list, following the fact that their performance or audits have been provided? Answer. Well, there are perhaps two aspects to your question. First of all, in general, relative to all our recommendations, departments are in agreement with our recommendations, and they prepare action plans in order to deal with the issues that we've identified. In my opening statement, I stated the results of a survey, and these results talk about departments or organizations that have identified the fact that they think that our recommendations added value, and so the audits were a value-added exercise for them, and in that case they had rather neutral responses. But really it's an assessment of the departments where we carried out an audit. It is their assessment as to the value of those audits. Thank you very much.
Mr. Godin for 7 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Auditor General. Dear colleagues, good morning to all of you. You are our resource and our source to ensure that we do our work well, and we're trying to see if you're doing that well, and I believe that is the case. But in the report that you've presented relating to the priorities for 2016-2017, you're identifying 3 objectives: to ensure the governance and management of the office be responsible, ensure that you have a maintained, skilled, engaged, and bilingual workforce, and third, to meet our objective, ensuring that we continue to select audits that are likely to have significant impact and value. So how next year can we assess that you've obtained those goals? What are the measures that you're going to put into place to allow us to see that you've achieved those goals at 50%, 70%, 150%, or 25%? So how can we assess those 3 objectives and whether you've attained those goals? Answer. Well, the performance measures for 2016-2017 are in Annex B of my opening statement, and they're an indication of the various indicators that we have put into place to measure our impact in terms of the 3 priorities. It is possible to identify the progress we've made because it is our objective to provide to the employees all the necessary training they require, and that we've identified the courses that are available and the participants in each of those courses. We also have training plans and development plans for language training in both official languages, and so we have those plans, and it is possible, therefore, to identify the progress that people make in that area. So Annex B has stipulated all the indicators that we've put into place as of now. Question. If we look at the bilingual workforce, right now at the Auditor General's office, what is the situation relating to bilingualism of the workforce relative to other departments? Answer. I can't establish a link with other organizations. Of course, there are requirements to have some positions as bilingual positions, and all the supervisor positions are such that it's important to have people who fill those positions who can speak both languages. And so as part of our language plan, we want to ensure that all supervisors have the necessary ratings in the language area, and that they have the ability to communicate in both official languages. That said, I cannot compare with other departments. Perhaps I could ask my colleague Sylvain to answer that question. Answer. Well, we are subject to the same standards. Our management positions have to be imperatively bilingual, as is the case for other departments, and the same thing applies for any position where one can be promoted to management level. Question. You can say that you're respecting the standards in their entirety. Answer. Yes. In terms of our training plans and development plans, what we have in place is to ensure that we have a bilingual workforce, keeping in mind the requirements in place. Question. At point 17 of your opening statement, Mr. Auditor General, you're saying that you're asking for a full-time equivalent employees of 570 people in order to be able to complete 85 financial audits, 24 permanence audits, and 6 special examinations. In 2014-2015, you had 547 employees. Have your employee numbers have gone down, or you're tired, and that's why you're asking for this number of employees in order to be able to provide a similar quantity of audits? Question. Well, are we worn out or tired? Well, I think it's a little bit like everybody else. But of course, as a result of our downsizing a few years ago, we had reduced the workforce, and we also reduced the work that we undertook. And now we're at a limit. And so we're trying to see options in that regard. Question. But if I understand correctly, you've been able to provide accordingly reports and audits that are satisfactory. And so I'm asking why you need such an increase in additional workforce. Answer. Well, in the short term, we are able to carry out quality work, but in the long term, in terms of the nature of our operations, if we want to invest in knowledge, we have to remember that the short term is one thing, but the long term is an entirely different issue. And so we don't really want to reduce the quality of our work. That's it for me. Thank you. Oh, rather, in the report you talk about in 2014, 2015, you said that you carry out audits, but how do you make a choice of the audits that you want to undertake? Answer. Well, it's really a way to assess the risks that exist within programs. And so we have a process to identify the various programs within departments, and also to identify the risks associated. And with this information, we can identify the programs where we would carry out audits. But we also have to remember that we must respect that half of our work is related to the audit of financial statements. And so they're audits that are dealing with the way in which certain Crown corporations prepare their financial statements and information. And those reports are different from our performance audits. And so half of our work is related to financial statement audits. But when we talk about performance audits, this is a process to identify programs and to identify risks within those programs and to choose the programs that are the most important. Thank you very much.
To Mr. Christofferson, please, for 7 minutes.
Very good. Thank you, Chair. Good to see you all again. First up, just wanted to comment on paragraph 9 of your opening statements and underscore this issue of the committee and our performance. And I just want to draw attention to the abysmal record in the last few years in the last Parliament, and how already the numbers are starting to jump. And just doing quick math in terms of what we're looking at in the future, the chapters we've picked, I think we're going to come not only close to that 65, we're actually going to, we stand a chance to exceed it, which is just wonderful. And I know that the Auditor General agrees that the more public airing we can give to his findings, the more effect they will have and the more we're doing our job. So I just wanted to mention that because it's a good thing. Then I want to move to page 12 of the opening statements. Mr. Ferguson, in the, let's see how to describe this. It's all under point 2, strategic objective. But I wanted to come to, if you go to the far right-hand column, discussion of targets not met. You go down to the last point in that column, and it says 2 audits not completed by their statutory deadline, and there's a footnote, and the footnote says audits of the Canadian Forces Pension Plan and the Reserve Forces Pension Plan were not completed by their statutory deadlines. So what's going on there, please?
Well, again, in general, the information related to those 2 sets of financial statements, you know, weren't ready for us at the time that we did an audit. We've had and we've expressed problems with the Reserve Force Pension Plan being able to do the audit of that in the past. So, I mean, these have been long-standing issues that we've been wrestling with. I believe it was on the Reserve Force Pension Plan that we stopped doing the audit for a period of time. Then we came back in to do another audit, and maybe Mr. Bergen can give us the details.
As the Auditor General has said, we've had issues with 2 audits, the Canadian Forces Pension Plan and the Reserve Forces Pension Plan. In the case of the Reserve Forces Pension Plan, we actually were not able to issue an opinion on their 2014 financial statements. We are going in and we are doing limited procedures to try to give as much assurance as we can.
If I can, Chair, sorry to interrupt, but is that the one that just got recently implemented? We did a hearing on it, the Reserve Pension Plan?
The Reserve Force Pension Plan has been around for quite a while. We used to try and do audits on it. We weren't able to express an opinion, so we stopped doing it for a while. Then we came back in, and in 2014, you know, still weren't able to provide an opinion. So this is a pension plan, you know, the financial statements of the pension plan for the reserve forces.
It's just that I thought I recalled a report from your office.
We did a report.
They're dragging their heels and implementing it.
We did a report on a performance audit report also on the reserve force pension plan. You know, that was before. You know, before I took this position, so I don't have the details of it right now, but certainly this has been an issue that we've raised before.
Anyway, I'll bet you if we look. Anyway, sorry, I apologize. Go ahead, sir.
As we're in the process of trying to go back in and do a limited audit so that we can give some opinion on it, but we have not been able to do that yet. We're still trying.
All right, but it says statutory deadline. Help me understand, what exactly is a statute? I think I know, but I'm going to ask you, what's a statutory deadline?
Well, often under the legislation, it says that the organization is supposed to, you know, make its audited financial statements public by a certain date. So, you know, that's what we're measuring about, is whether they get their financial statements prepared and out by that date required by legislation.
How can they not? Like, how can they just sort of decide to do it or not do it? It's statutory or it isn't.
Well, and I guess in terms of the direct question, that's really a question for national defense to answer. But certainly there's a requirement, and that's why we measure it, and that's why we highlight it in our report, is to let Parliament know, when there are situations that organizations are not meeting their statutory deadlines for issuing those audited statements.
Is there no penalty whatsoever for missing a statutory deadline? You just have to acknowledge it and move on?
I guess I don't have all of the statutes in front of me, but certainly I cannot recall any statute that has a penalty associated with not meeting that deadline.
Okay, well then the best we've got is public pressure, public shaming. Is there anything we can do? This is an ongoing problem. You've identified it before. It's here again before us. There's nothing to indicate that it's going to be any different a year from now. Is there anything we can do as a committee to assist in getting them to meet their legal obligations?
And I think that's a very good question, because one of the concerns that I have and that we're trying to sort out is, again, this committee in particular really doesn't know very much about the work that we do on financial statement audit. Because when we present reports to this committee, it's about our performance audits, and now we've been including the special examinations as well, but there really isn't anything that we bring to the committee about our financial statement audits. So we are trying to put together a report that we would be able to bring to this committee about our financial audit practice that would help to bring these types of issues forward. So I can take back, and think about your comment on this particular issue. I think longer term, we're trying to find a better way to bring this information forward so that there's a regular way that you can help us with these types of issues.
Excellent. Thank you. I think I have just but moments left. If I could just quickly, and it's been touched on by others, but the senior manager's feedback, the 80% to the 59%, and I noted your extra notes on page 15, and it says we're analyzing the responses in detail. But can you give us, again, if you touched on it while I was busy looking at other documents, I apologize, but what's your sense at this point of why such a dramatic departure?
We're way out of time.
Well, I guess we really don't have a reason for why the departure. What we're doing with it, though, is we're identifying that we need to spend more time with our relationship with those organizations so that we can go in and get a better understanding of how they are viewing the performance audits that we're doing.
Thank you. We will now move back to Mr. Area, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to speak on the bilingualism you mentioned in para 14. Let me be very clear. I do support bilingualism. However, for millions of immigrant families, English or French, they are neither the first or the second language. They come here, they study hard, they work hard, they become proficient in one of the official languages. And for them, entering into public service is a major, major problem. 2 weeks back, I went door knocking. I met an immigrant family that got a young daughter, young professional. She spoke to me at length of her experience. She interned in one of the federal departments here, and she was not recruited because her manager told her she is not bilingual. Now she works with one of the 4 major audit firms. We not only lost a good professional, but it leaves a very bad taste in the mouth of the families. So I understand that some of the ads, your recruitment ads, mention something like bilingualism is an asset. Maybe the managers are using that to recruit only bilingual candidates. I think unilingual candidates should be recruited and then trained in the second official language. With our aim to improve bilingualism, if we start recruiting only the young professionals who are already bilingual, it creates a major problem.
So I guess I can speak to, and I can ask Ms. Seeley to provide some more details, but I can speak to sort of what our approach is. And our approach is simply to make sure that we are respecting the laws and the policies of the Government of Canada as it relates to bilingualism and bilingualism requirements. So that means that people in supervisory positions have to have achieved a certain level of bilingualism as identified through testing through the federal government.
I understand, sir. I'm not talking about the supervisory level or the middle management or the senior management level. I'm talking of young professionals.
Right. No, I understand. So in terms of other positions, we don't have requirements for most of those positions. Of course, if you're talking support positions, a number of those maybe have to be bilingual, but in terms of audit professionals, starting out, we don't require people to be bilingual. We do have a capacity within our office to train people on their second language. And that's why we've put together these language plans. But I'll ask Ms. Seeley perhaps to provide more detail about the hiring process.
It's exactly the case of what Mr. Ferguson was saying. We hired 55 people last year, and 26 of them were at the entry level. And at the entry level, we request that our candidates are proficient in either English or French. And so, in fact, we do not require bilingualism at the entry level to the audit trainee program.
Yeah, but as I said, I know personally a lot of families here. I'm not talking about a middle-aged immigrant like me, who we may not have the capacity to be proficient in both official languages. I'm talking youngsters who go to universities here, they work hard, but they can't seem to get entry. At least I'm very happy to note that you guys are recruiting unilingual professionals and then training them to be bilingual. That's good, thanks.
Ms. Zahid, you have approximately 3 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. I would like to ask you that how do you determine which departments you are going to audit, and how do you keep a balance between auditing new departments or revisiting the departments for whom you have done the audits before?
So again, if I look across all of our mandate and everything that we are supposed to audit, first of all, we have a mandate to audit financial statements of the federal government, the government of the 3 territories, and Crown corporations. So those financial statement audits we do every year of all of those organizations. We have a mandate to do special examinations of the systems and practices that exist within Crown corporations, federal Crown corporations, and we have to do a special examination of each Crown corporation at least once every 10 years, at least of all of the ones that are listed in the Financial Administration Act, which is most of them. We have to do that special examination once every 10 years. So we have certain things that we are legislated that we have to do. In terms of our performance audits, we look across the federal government. We've divided the federal government, I suppose, up into a number of envelopes, whether they be sort of international affairs, obviously the environment, Aboriginal affairs, those types of things. And then we will do what we call a strategic audit plan to try to identify the risks in those areas. So it's not so much about looking really at a particular department, but it's looking at an area and doing a strategic audit plan that looks at all of the departments within that area, looking at the types of programs they offer and the risks that are associated with those. And then the ones that we feel that there is the most risk that something needs to be improved, those will be the ones that we will select for a performance audit.
How do you go back to the departments which you have audited before? Like, what is the process of making sure that the recommendations which you have made when you audit a particular department, that they are being implemented? Again, we do follow-up audits. So the process is for the departments, when we make the recommendations, they will agree with our recommendations. They will prepare an action plan. From time to time, we will do a follow-up audit, but again, sort of remembering the time frames involved. So by the time we finish an audit, we probably have to give the department about 3 years or so to implement those recommendations.
then we would need to come back and do an audit, and the work that we do in that world is to make sure we still have audit level of assurance. So that means that we go in and we do another full audit that will include at least some follow-up of the recommendations we made previously. To complete that second audit from the time we choose it until the time we report it could easily be 18 months. So from the point in time that we present the first audit report until we can present a follow-up audit report, we may be sort of 5 years out from, when we made those original recommendations. So it's certainly, why the role of this committee is particularly important, because the follow-up audits are important, but they can't be the only way of making sure that departments are implementing the recommendations. And the fact that departments have to come here, have to tell you what they're going to do, maybe you bring them back in after, a year or year and a half, and they can explain to you the progress they've made. All of those types of things, I think, are a fundamental aspect of making sure that departments are, in fact, implementing the recommendations.
Thank you very much. We're well over. We'll now move over to the official opposition one more time and go to Mr. Doherty, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our guests. Mr. Ferguson, you've been the Auditor General since 2011, is that correct?
That's correct.
So my questions are going to touch more on organizational behavior and performance, similar to some of the line of questioning that we've had earlier on. I'll be the first to say that it looks like you have been taking some steps to streamline the process and make your organization more effective. However, your performance, your key indicators in your performance reports or your performance audits are below, almost failing, I would say, in terms of what the measures that you are putting forward. You're far below your targets. Could you say that perhaps the process that you use in terms of determining the audits could be flawed and might need to be revisited to make your the work more relevant and perhaps go away from or mitigate the apathetic responses that you're getting from some of the organizations that you are reporting on?
So again, in terms of the indicator, the particular indicator, which is, that the people that we have done a performance audit on believe that the audit has added value. When we do fall below our target on that, I think it is very much an indication that we need to spend more time, first of all, understanding with the organizations that we've done the audit of, why they felt that the audit didn't provide value. Remembering that this is always a difficult measure because, people don't like to be audited. And our audits in particular are, they're not just audits, but they're also publicly available and there's public discussion about them. So that can make some people uncomfortable. It's not always a surprise that some people didn't like being audited and could therefore say they didn't feel like the audit process added value.
Great.
But for us, it's a matter of understanding with them, having the relationship with them to understand why they felt perhaps that value wasn't there.
Well, and that leads me to my next point that I was going to say. Again, going back just to strictly business and customer service. Ultimately, you have customers, and but if we were just to look at the customer side of it, you are falling below in the customer service side of it in terms of the relevance or the importance that your customers are placing on your reports. And I think that a better understanding of what your customers are looking for is very important, and spending that time organizationally to be able to develop that, but also internally developing that skill set to be able to go in and actually extrapolate that information, build that relationship with your customers. Next question is there a penalty for non-compliance? in terms of your customers. So if you provide a report, you audit an organizational department, and your own words, you follow up from time to time. 1 to 3 years, that gives any organization a time to whether they choose to follow up or not, or act on your recommendations. What's the penalty for non-compliance?
Well, again, the only thing that we do when we do an audit is identify where we think things need to be improved. We make recommendations. The department comes up with an action plan to deal with the issues we've identified. I guess their penalty is, if things are not working the way that they should, that they have a very uncomfortable couple of hours in front of this committee and maybe come back again. There's nothing in the legislation that requires people to implement recommendations of the Auditor General, nor in fact should there be, in my opinion, because these are recommendations we're making to department and the government, and it's up to the government to decide what they're going to do with those recommendations.
Perfect. Any more time?
You're pretty well out of time. You have 10 seconds, but just concluding.
You're asking for more. You're asking for money for us here before here. What are you going to do differently so that we get different results?
Well, I guess in terms of the performance audits, remember that there are more clients than just the people that we are auditing. There is also, this committee, the Public Accounts Committee. So, to the extent, I think to the extent that the Public Accounts Committee feels that our audits are adding value, that's our primary measure. And we do from time to time sit down. Mr. Bergen will go around and talk to individual parliamentarians from time to time to get the sense of whether they feel those audits are adding value. So, we constantly are working towards making sure that we are selecting the right audits, things that are going to be of interest, things where we believe there are risks, and then we are always working on ways to better communicate those audits, try and make sure that the written communication we have is both clear and concise. So we're constantly trying to improve both how we select the audits and then how we report the audits.
Thank you very much. We'll move to Ms. Shanahan, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, and again, thank you to the Auditor General and to your team for being here. This session gives us a wonderful opportunity to understand more about the work that you do, because indeed, in the various committees that I'm involved in, I have the pleasure of seeing you and your work quite often. And I just want to clarify something. Indeed, are the departments your customers, or is it not ourselves, the Parliament, and in fact the people of Canada? Do the departments actually pay for your services? I mean, this is why we're here this morning, is we're looking at your estimates for your budget.
So our budget is provided just as a budget to the Office of the Auditor General, and within that we make the decision about what to audit. Certainly, what we consider to be our primary client is Parliament. Also, we would consider the Crown corporations. In terms of and the territorial legislatures, of course. In terms of the performance audits, we see that more as, again, making sure that we've got relationships. So, the term client in that sense would be used very loosely. But, it's making sure that we've got the right relationships. They are certainly important stakeholders in the work that we are doing. But they aren't asking us and therefore paying, to have a performance audit done. We're choosing to do those performance audits. And once we've chosen something, the performance audit is going to be done, essentially whether the department wants it done or not.
All right, so thank you very much for clarifying that, because indeed I think that's really the object of this committee here, is to be examining your audits and taking those conclusions and recommendations in order to better serve the Canadian public. That's really the whole purpose. It's not necessarily, although I agree that departments, wise managers would be very well advised to take those recommendations in their work going forward. I'd like to take this just on a completely different tact, although I will be interested in the financial reporting side as you bring that report forward in the future. But a completely different tact would be the environmental auditor. I had the pleasure of hearing her report while sitting in on the Environment Committee, and I'm just wondering, is there not a place or a time or an appropriate occasion for the environmental auditor to report to this committee?
And certainly I've talked about that in the past, because so one of our indicators is the number of our reports that have committee hearings. In the past, we struggled to have hearings on any of the audits that were being produced under the mandate of the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development. Now, I think the Environment Committee has started to have some hearings, but certainly I would encourage this committee to look at the audits and the work that have been done under the banner of the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development, because again, just so everybody is aware, the Commissioner is within our office. All of the work that is done by the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development, those works are either audits or studies that are all done according to our methodology. So, what is produced by the Commissioner are audits just like any of the other audits that I have presented. The Commissioner will be presenting a report, a series, I think, of 3 audits in a couple of weeks at the end of May, I believe. So I would certainly encourage this committee to look at those and decide whether the committee was interested in having a hearing on any of those reports.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Do I have any more time? Okay. So just another quick question, and again, I'm trying not to cross committee eyes too much, but it is important for there to be a consistency between when we're looking at estimates and when we're looking at end results. Any opinion on cash versus accrual accounting methods?
So I'm going to have an opportunity to appear before the Government Operations Committee this afternoon. Certainly, in terms of financial statements, accrual accounting, is how financial statements have to be prepared. There's no alternative to accrual accounting for the government's financial statements or the financial statements for Crown corporations. Certainly, in those sets of financial statements, there's always a statement of cash flows, and that's as important a statement as the income statement or the balance sheet or any other statement, and that provides the information about cash. I think the question about cash versus accrual is very much more a question of how the estimates are prepared and what is Parliament voting on. My preference would be to keep everything consistent between the budget, which is on an accrual basis, and the financial statements, which are on an accrual basis, therefore to put the estimates on an accrual basis. But you have to remember that that would mean different information would be presented than is presented right now. So I could talk about that for a long time, but I think I'd better cut it off there.
Thank you. If you wouldn't have cut it off, I would have cut you off. So thank you very much. We'll go back and go to Mr. Doherty, please.
Mr. Ferguson, since 2011, how has the organization changed since you've been in place?
Well, I can tell you how I think it's changed. I think, however, all I know is what the organization has been since I've been there. So I don't know, maybe Monsieur Ricard or Ms. Seeley could provide some more information. A few things, though, that we have done in particular. One is we have reduced the number of senior assistant auditors general level. So the very top level of the organization, we have reduced that. I believe when I started in the organization, the executive table was about 16 people. We are now down, we have a couple of pending retirements, and that will get us to 9. So, we've significantly reduced that. Of course, we also went through the strategic operating review process. So, in that process, we were able to identify some financial audits that we were doing that we felt really didn't need to be done or didn't need to be done by us, so we made that reduction. We identified that we were not meeting our requirements on official languages at all of our supervisory levels, so we've put in place a strategy to deal with that. You know, we've done, again, because we've reduced the number of assistant auditors general, it meant that we had to better define the roles and responsibilities of the next two levels in the organization, what we refer to as the principals and the directors. We've had to clearly define what their responsibilities are and who's responsible for delivering audits and who's responsible for making sure the quality of audits. So those would be a number of the main things that we have done. I think the other thing that we are and we continue to struggle with, because we do promote performance measurement, we do promote reporting on performance. We constantly struggle with trying to get a good performance measure for understanding the value that is coming particularly from a performance audit. Because right now we have that sort of very unsatisfactory measurement of just being able to survey people and saying, do you think it added value or do you not? And also, you know, the follow-up audits, but that might be 5 years down the road. So we are trying to find additional ways to measure the value we bring from performance audits.
I really appreciate your comments, and in no way are my questions to diminish any of your impact on that organization, only to get some more information. My final question is, how can we as Parliament help make you more effective, make your team more effective, and help the process?
So I think that's interesting. I think there are probably a few things. Some of them might be legislative. You know, there are some requirements in legislation that we have to do, and whenever there are legislative requirements, I mean, of course, that's indicating to us Parliament's interest at that point in time, but it also can tie our hands. So, for example, in the case of the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development, there's a requirement that we look at the sustainable development strategies, the sustainable development strategies of the government once every year, and we do an audit of it. You know, if we had more flexibility about, you know, exactly what types of audit we were going to do, when we were going to do it, then that would mean that we wouldn't have our hands tied, per se. Similarly, you know, as I said, we are required to do a special examination of Crown corporations once every 10 years, at least once every 10 years. Of course, if we think that there's a particular Crown corporation that we feel that it's risky how they're running their operations, we can go in more often than the once every 10 years. But there may be Crown corporations that are very well run, and we can look at indicators that say they are very well run, and maybe they don't need us in there once every 10 years. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. So, you know, just some things that would provide us a little bit more flexibility, you know, I think would be a starting point.
Thank you for your time. Thank you, Mr. Doherty. And we will now move over to Ms. Mendez, and then.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to refer to your report about the plans and priorities for 2016-17. And you mentioned, or you alert us to the possibility that labor negotiations may have an impact on future performance audits, if I read it correctly. Is this something that we should be aware of, or?
So that, Mr. Chair, that's just sort of the normal scan of our environment and looking at, you know, what are possible risks out there. And of course, you know, whenever you're in a situation of, you know, contracts having to be negotiated and put in place, you know, if there should happen to ever be any disruption, that could have an impact on us. So, you know, not that we are expecting one, but it is a risk we have to be aware of and we have to plan for.
So it's just one of the elements that you take into account. Another question I had is about your own periodical external reviews of your work. Who does them? Who would be the ones?
So that happened. Well, I guess there are a few things. First of all, we are audited by the institutes of chartered professional accountants in all of the jurisdictions we operate in terms of the work that we do on our financial statement audits. And we operate in Vancouver, Edmonton, Montreal, Halifax, and Ottawa. We have offices in all of those areas. So any of those institutes of chartered professional accountants could come in at any time at the work that we've done through those offices and evaluate, whether our audit files are appropriate. Once every 10 years, there's also referred to as what's a peer review, and this happens at an international level. So, Auditor General offices around the world have put in place a mechanism to do peer reviews. It happens once every 10 years. So for us, that's essentially once a mandate for an Auditor General. The last one that was done on our office was done, I believe, in 2009, 2010, in about that time period. It was led by the National Audit Office of Australia and would also have had participation from some other national audit offices. We are right now in the process of planning for the next one, which would probably happen in maybe 2018, 2019, something like that, to sort of put our name forward and say we're going to want this done. And we also actually participate in some of these peer reviews of others. So we will put auditors on peer reviews of other national audit organizations as well.
Okay, thank you very much. For me,
You're
that's
out
it.
of time. Mr. Harvey, we can go to you.
Yeah, I just have one quick question. Earlier, you had mentioned about the two audits for the Reserve Forces Pension Plan and the Canadian Forces Pension Plan that were cancelled, right?
Not cancelled.
They weren't conducted anyway.
No, they were issued after the statutory date. In terms of the Reserve Force pension, yes, we may have. We weren't able to do that one. I'll ask Mr. Bergen to give you the details.
We have done the Canadian Forces Pension Plan about a year late, but we have done them, and we have just issued the most recent one. So it is proceeding. It's the Reserve Forces Pension Plan where we have the issue, and right now we are trying to do a smaller audit there, but we're in the process of trying to do that. It's not done yet.
So what are the inhibiting factors that are leading you to not be able to conduct that audit?
The fundamental problem in terms of the Reserve Force pension is the quality of the underlying data that they have. Just hasn't lent itself to being audited. It hasn't been up to date. They've been doing a lot of work to try and make sure that the data is clean and appropriate, but that's been the underlying issue.
We talked about accountability earlier and how, these statutory deadlines, it's the same idea. You talk about a statutory deadline, how there's not really any enforcement tools to go along with that. But I would compare that to this. There's not really any tools in place to make departments accountable to provide the information then. Is that where we're...
Well, so, again, I think I think part of what's important about this conversation, again, is very often parliamentarians don't know that we issue audit opinions on sets of financial statements. In terms of something like the Reserve Force pension, our audit opinion might be, I don't know, a denial of opinion or something, but it would not be a regular this set of financial statements has been prepared in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles type of opinion. I think, because so many federal organizations do get a standard audit opinion on their financial statements, they are able to prepare financial statements that can be audited and are fairly presented, that I think that's often taken for granted. But every now and then there are some that either are not able to meet their authorities, statutory deadline, for example, or don't have the information that's needed to be able to produce a set of financial statements that can be audited. And I think that those are very much things that, parliamentarians should be alert to. This is sort of right now the one way that we have to let people know about that. If we produce a summary report about our work, that might put a little bit more light on it. But again, I think it very much comes down to that's all we can do is provide the information and say this is what the situation is. There's nothing else that we can do in those instances.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll move to Mr. Christofferson, please.
Thanks, Chair. If I can, I just pick up on the last point. It still troubles me, this reserve pension, and I'm just going to ask, Chair, through you, if the analysts could consider just doing a check back. I seem to recall clearly dealing with this, and the issue at the time was that they were dragging their heels on setting up this plan. And it was quite scathing in terms of the things that they were supposed to do and hadn't done. And it's pensions, you know? I mean, it's always worrisome when there's anything to do with pensions that is a problem. Number one, it's big, big money as a rule. And secondly, you know, we're talking at the end of the day about people's ability to survive when they're retired. It's kind of a big issue these days. So if analysts would be kind enough just to check that. I could be totally wrong. I don't trust my memory well, but I seem to recall that. So if you would, please. Second, it needs to be said. I don't think it has. If it has, it can be said again. It's an excellent report, actually. If you look, there's far more target met than anything else, and certainly more than most. And of course, you always put yourself in an unusual position when you come here, because you spend all year pointing out where everybody else is not running things quite the way that it should be, and then you're on the line once a year in terms of your operation, and you run the risk of being a hypocrite. And in fact, it's quite the opposite. I think you're showing stellar leadership, and we know that there's been surveys about how your department is one of, if not the best to work in, and that's consistent. So, some credit where credit's due. It's an excellent report in terms of the areas you've met, and we appreciate that, and we know that you're serious about getting things up to speed in a couple of the areas that aren't quite where we'd all like them. Now, I also just want to give a quick shout out. I'm sure he's not watching, but if my friend Daryl Cramp is out there, or anybody that knows Daryl, let him know that accrual finances and auditing is right back again. This was his thing for over 10 years. I want to tell colleagues, I've been on this committee, as you know now, forever and a day, and it still is a challenge to understand accrual accounting. And at some point, we do need to have a bit of a briefing on it, because I think we still have the issue of purchasing still not being in accrual, although that may now be resolved. But anyway, I just wanted to give a shout out to Daryl, who invested a lot of time and effort and cared about this committee in a way that I think reflects the gold standard of what this committee is about. And Daryl, accrual is still with us, wherever you are, man. And lastly, a serious question. Make sure I can find my serious question. Give me a second. There we are. Under your performance measures and results for 2014-15, build and maintain relationships with parliamentarians and key stakeholders. That's a big statement. Your indicators, development of a relationship management plan and related objectives. I see it's in development, but I'm curious as hell as to what a structured relationship maintenance plan looks like, especially when you're dealing with types like us. So just some thoughts on I'm curious as to how that work's going and where it's going.
Well, you know, again, I think, and that's relevant to the conversation we had before about the indication of how the people that we are auditing are perceiving the value of our audits, right? So in a relationship management plan, essentially at the very high level, what we will do is first identify who are the key people that we need to have the relationships with. You know, that who is it and who is it on our side of the fence that should be maintaining that relationship. And that can be, you know, again, to understand the issues, to understand issues around audit. It can be various stakeholders, so it's not just the people that we audit. It could be, you know, representatives of the department, the Crown Corporation, chairs of audit committees, particularly on Crown corporations, audit committees of departments, because departments have internal audit committees, parliamentarians, right? So identifying all of those different people that we need to have relationships with, and then make sure that periodically we are making the contacts that we need to make with them to understand how they perceive our work and how they perceive our value. So we're trying to put some structure around that, and it's primarily around who should we be making the contact with, who should be making the contact, and what types of things do we need to make sure that we are discussing in those conversations.
Great. Thank you, Chair. That concludes my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Christofferson. I'm not certain if there's anyone more on the government side, but we do have Monsieur Gaudin for 5 minutes.
Oui. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me get sorted here. You said, Mr. Auditor General, you said that organizations receive the reports and they're tabled, and where there are questions about that, they come here and appear before our committee and spend 2 hours answering questions, and then after that everything proceeds on to the next audit. Do you have methods that you've put into place or seen through your experience and through your involvement in all sorts of other legislative assemblies to indicate that we might have better tools? Because I'm rather disappointed. You audit things, you provide your information, and then we have departments who come here to hearings, but we have nothing to ensure that these people are accountable and that there are consequences. We were talking about the reserve pension fund, and everything is just sort of going through in time. It's not your fault. You may not have the tools to impose pressure for those requirements to be met. Could you recommend to us certain ways we might proceed, and to see if through the Parliament we might put into place certain tools that we could apply? Because I think that we're working, but there's one step that is missing. And so based on your experience, according to you, are there things that we could put into place in order to be more effective? Answer. I think that it is the situation of having certain indicators. When we've finished an audit, oftentimes there are different analyses that we've carried out through that audit, and we've identified indicators that indicate problems, whether it be through the analysis or the data that we've provided in the audit. And so as a result, we're trying to find a way of identifying, in my view, these identical indicators to ensure that they're updated once we have completed an audit. And so if there is a specific audit that we've carried out, we've made an analysis, we've identified a certain percentage of one aspect relating to a program, well then in the process prepare this analysis, we've identified the data that are required to carry out the analysis, and in the future it would be possible to gather the same information and to prepare the same analysis. So it's not a question of carrying out another audit or a follow-up audit, but rather it is an issue of updating some of the indicators that we identified in the audit. And with those indicators, perhaps then it would be possible to have indications in the future as to whether improvements have occurred or not, because it would seem that through the indicators there were improvements in the results relating to those indicators. Question. Well, as far as organizations that are compliant, but what do we do with an organization such as the one that is in charge of the reserve pension plan? What do we do with them whether they're not compliant and they're not collaborating with you and they're not respecting the timeframes? Answer. Well, it was not an issue of lack of cooperation. I believe that in the case of the Canadian Force, the Reserve Forces pension plan, there was an issue with the data in the system. But of course, in the past, and I believe that in the past we did carry out an audit on that issue, and perhaps there will be an opportunity to re-examine the work that we've carried out in the past. At this point, I don't have a precise answer to provide for you, but perhaps I could identify certain steps that we could follow on in order to settle this specific issue with the Reserve Forces Pension Plan.
What my colleague was trying to get at, those other organizations using the reserve, as a pension reserve as an example, those that are not compliant or that are being challenging for your organization, what are things that we can do here to make it easier so that they are?
Well, and again, I think it's the same answer. You know, I mean, for the most, we do have good cooperation from the departments and the organizations we audit, right? So I don't want to leave any impression that we're saying people don't collaborate with us, because they do. And oftentimes we will find that as soon as we go in and we do an audit, that departments are trying to correct the problem before the audit gets out, because when the audit gets out, they want to be able to say, we've already dealt with it. But from time to time, there are issues that we raise that take a long time, and because we can't go in and do a follow-up on every audit, or by the time we do a follow-up audit, it takes a while, some of the audits and the results that we have brought forward can be forgotten. So, you know, so maybe it is a question of, today the focus has been around this question of the reserve force pension. And we can use that as an example where, you know, yes, we can go back to identify, in fact, was there a performance audit? Was there a piece of work that was brought to this committee? You know, and then the committee can decide whether there's something that they can do about that, you know, given sort of the fact that we still can't provide an audit opinion. There was a piece of work done a while back. Is that something the committee could think about doing? So, you know, it's very much, the role of the committee is very much about very much about keeping the departments, helping to keep the departments to their commitments, right? So it's not, and I think unfortunately, and I think it's changing now, but I think unfortunately the world had moved into what I'll call a one and done situation with these types of audits. So a department would have to come here, they would talk to the audit for a couple of hours, and then they would know that they'd never have to sort of come back and talk about it again unless we were going to do a follow-up audit. But I think if this committee is sort of more keeping an eye on specific issues and specific items that have been brought forward, and say, okay, you're coming in and you're going to have a hearing, and then you're going to come back in a year or a year and a half, even if there isn't another audit, to tell us about what you've done. You know, I think that will keep the pressure on departments.
Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Harvey, please.
Just one quick question, and then I'm done. We talked about, well, we used the reserve force pension as an example, and you just referenced that again, but is that a common issue amongst departments? Is it a situation where you find yourself more than one occasion where a department is unable to provide you the information that you need in order to perform your audit due to their data management or their lack thereof of data management?
And I think, you know, we talked about that in the context of the performance audits that I released last week. But in the context of financial audits, it's actually very unusual to find ourselves in a situation where the underlying information is not sufficient for us to be able to provide an opinion on a set of financial statements. So on that side of the work that we do in the financial audit side, you know, the data is usually managed in a way that the quality is there for us to be able to express an opinion on a set of financial statements. So it is not usually a problem we have there. In terms of the performance audits, as we talked about last week, then certainly there we see a lot more problems with the way the administrative data is captured, and we talked about the problem with addresses at Citizenship Canada, or the problem with the information about the preparedness of reserve force soldiers at National Defence. So on the administrative side, which is what we tend to look at in our performance audits, there are a significant number of problems with data. On the financial audit side, it's much rarer to have those types of problems, but the one instance where we have it is the reserve force pension.
But with that having been said, we're talking specifically right at this moment, I guess, about, I mentioned the reserve force pension, and for me, I'm way more concerned about the inability of that department to have accurate data financially for the reserve force pension than I am about their ability to give us the data about who's going to be affected by the drug plan. Not that I'm not concerned about that, because I am, but I think that that's a real big problem if that department can't provide the data in order for you to do a proper audit on that pension plan.
That is certainly a significant problem, again, that we identified a number of years ago, and I believe that Mr. Christofferson is correct, although it was before my time, so I'm just going by vague memory of what I've been told. But I believe that we did prepare a report on the issues around the reserve force pension. And we stopped doing audits in them for a period of time because there just wasn't any sense. And then we've gone back in to try to see whether the information is auditable yet, and it still isn't. So I think you're right to be concerned about that particular situation.
Yeah, and in closing, I guess from my point of view, what's that say about us as government if we're saying the data is not auditable, so we're going to leave it for a while and then we're going to come back, and if it's still not auditable, then we'll worry about it later. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me, especially when you're talking about fiscal accounting on an ongoing basis. Like, this to me is a very grave problem, so I just wanted to highlight that, I guess.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey. And Mr. Doherty, you had a final concluding comment?
Absolutely, and I will echo my colleague from across the way. In today's time, it is absolutely troubling that an organization does not follow the general accounting practices and cannot provide this data. And the fact of the matter that our Auditor General can't get this information from is troubling for me. So I would expect something to be done rather than waiting another 6 or 7 years for us to follow up on it. Mr. Ferguson, what is the percentage of audits that your organization does do follow-ups on?
Well, in terms of the performance audit, I don't think I can sort of say an exact percentage. What we do in our planning is 2 ways of potential follow-up. One is to say, do we want to do a specific follow-up on exactly what we did sometime in the past? So we will just make a decision. We'll look at audits we've done in the past, and we'll ask our auditors to identify if there are any that they feel there needs to be a follow-up on. Also, though, the other way that it will happen is sometimes we will go in and we will look at a program, and the program may be similar to a program we've audited in the past, and we may be able to follow up on some of the recommendations we made in the past because of that overlap. So it wouldn't be called a specific follow-up audit, but it may follow up on some recommendations. In the last audit, in the last series of audits that we released, we did a specific follow-up audit on the Governor and Council appointments. We changed slightly the way that we did it, but we still identified that there were still vacancies on administrative tribunals that make decisions for people, that there were still backlogs in some of the decisions those tribunals were making, so identified the same types of issues, so that was a follow-up. In the audit on prescription drug program for veterans, there we followed up on one aspect. We had done an audit in the past on prescription drug programs across multiple departments. This time we just went in and looked at Veterans Affairs, and we talked about what they were doing the last time we audited in terms of monitoring the information they have on prescription drug usage by veterans, and we provided a bit of follow-up this time about the progress they had made on that. So in terms of the percentage, it isn't, I can't give you a definite percentage. It's simply a decision that we make in each planning cycle.
Can you tell me why you don't follow up on all of the audits?
If we were to follow up on all of the audits, so what would end up happening is at some point all of our work would just become follow-up, right? So if we So if we do 10 audits this year, you know, and in 3 years' time, if we then have to follow up on all 10 of the audits, then it doesn't give us much room to audit new programs, right? So it's very much, that's why if we can find some ways to provide some indicators, to look for some indicators of whether departments have been making progress in the meantime, then we would be able to reduce that work and maybe provide the committee with a little bit more information of whether it looks like departments are on the right track without necessarily having to come in and do another audit.
Thank you, and I would also say that I think, you know, I think all of our committee has hit on part of our responsibility here. Yes, we can ask the question of the Auditor General, you know, why aren't you following up on more? Why aren't you? The question really comes back to this committee that we have the opportunity to hold these folks accountable as well. And, you know, I think even today we've maybe been given a little prodding, you know, towards, you know, the reserve pension plan maybe coming and or at least sitting down and saying, how can we hold them a little more accountable so that the books can be open, so that there's transparency, so that Canadians know, and as Mr. Christofferson said, pensioners will have a certain degree of confidence in what's going on. And so maybe at the next subcommittee, the steering committee, we will discuss this. Is there any way of knowing which audits are ongoing or underway right now? I know that you don't publish, you know, all of a sudden we get your reports and we know what's coming down, but is it a secret, or is it, you know, is there a way to know what you're reporting on now?
Certainly, Mr. Chair, in the report on plans and priorities, the 2016-17 report on plans and priorities, at the back in section 3, we provide all of the planned audits for 2016-17. So that includes the fall 2016 reports that we are planning to bring to you. So they're there. You know, the reports. Well, okay, so the spring, first there's the spring report of the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development that I mentioned. That doesn't actually come through this committee, but that will be on safety of consumer products, federal support for sustainable communities, and federal support to mitigate the effects of severe weather. In fall 2016, reports of the Auditor General of Canada,
priorities,
you know, are there. And then the fall report of the 2016 report of the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development is there as well. The website, our website also has the spring 2017 reports listed now, which are there. So in this report, it goes up to the end of fall of 2016, and on our website, the audits that we have planned for spring of 2017 are there.
However, you will conduct an audit should, you know, all of a sudden there be a massive issue in the media or in Parliament where there is a high question as to practices within a certain department. Do you also have the ability to perform an audit on those that may come up that are outside the planned audits that you have?
Our audit process is a very you know, structured way of doing audits. So yes, from time to time we can make the adjustments. We try to do our planning out so that our auditors know what they're going to be working on and they can start to prepare, and so the departments know that we're coming into. Every now and then we do have to adjust for something. I think probably the most visible example of that in the most recent past was when we agreed to do the audit of senators' expenses, and that of course meant that we had to make a significant adjustment to our plans and what we were going to do. So certainly we prefer to have a structured plan. We want to audit things of importance. We try not to just react to what the media story of the day is. We want to figure out whether, because by the time we get an audit organized and we execute that audit and report, you know, we're probably sort of 2 years out from when something becomes the issue of the day. So we need to understand whether that issue will still be important throughout that cycle. So we have to take all of those things into consideration.
Thank you very much. I think that pretty well is all the questions, and we do have to pass this motion here to whether or not we shall vote one, less the amount of $17,067,274.75 be granted an interim supply. Shall it carry?
So moved,
Ms.
Mr. Chair.
Mendez moves. All in favor then? And that is carried. And under vote one, should the Office of the Auditor General, shall the Chair report this to the House?
So
All in
moved.
favor?
Yes.
And that is carried. So we thank you very much again for coming. You appear very regularly before this committee, and we appreciate it. And we do appreciate the answers that we had in your testimony today. So we're going to suspend, and then we're coming back to do committee business that will be in camera. So we'll suspend for approximately 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.